Applicants have until the 17th of November to apply for various international mobile telecommunication bans that will come into effect on the 1st of December. A recent decision by ICASA to withdraw temporary spectrum handed out at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic invited frustration from the telecoms industry and also resulted in a lawsuit against the authority. Spectrum allocation has also been a source. Joining us now to explain what the availability of additional spectrum means for the sector is the editor-in-chief and publisher of Stuff magazine. That's Toby Shapshak of Stuff Studios. Hello, Toby, and thanks for joining us on the program. Now, Telkom, Vodacom, as well as MTN have withdrawn their legal action against the communications regulator, that's ICASA, over the planned withdrawal of their temporarily assigned spectrum at the end of this month. Start us off by giving us some context on where the matter stems from and what is the significance of this.
Thanks, and hello. So if we take a step back, what you have to remember is that spectrum is kind of like the foundation of how a mobile operator operates. It's what you use to transmit the signals that carry our voices or video images like this. And it's kind of like the ground that a hotel or a business is built on. If you don't have the ground, how do you build business? Well, you know, spectrum has many qualities, and operators are quite clever, and they've been able to reform some of these spectrum or frequencies for different uses. So, for instance, and this is the problem, ICASA hasn't licensed spectrum for 15 years. The last time they licensed spectrum was when 3G was up for sale. So we're talking about 5G, and South Africa's operators are having to kludge things together as if they're running a coal-fired power station when the rest of the world's running solar panels. So the operators have been very savvy in how they've reformed the spectrum. At the beginning of lockdown, as an emergency measure, ICASA released temporary spectrum of these very useful ranges of frequency that transmit data better than other frequencies. So because they're more suited to the transmission of data as opposed to voice isn't very data heavy, whereas a video signal like this, very, very data rich transmission. So if they use these spectrums, these frequencies that are much better suited for the transmission of data, it's obviously cheaper. They don't have to kludge things together or find a hack around the problem. So now what's happened is that ICASA wants to withdraw all of this temporary spectrum and license it in March. And many of these operators are saying, but hang on, we've been begging for 15 years for spectrum. Don't take this away from us. This is all we've gotten in a decade and a half. It's letting us operate and make a bit more profit and service more people better because more people are working from home because we had a pandemic. And it's come down to quite a complicated situation where some operators are saying, don't take it away. That was Telkom, Vodacom, and MTN, while other operators never took any because it was called temporary. So they thought, well, there's no point getting it. We're not going to have it for long, such as rain. So ICASA has announced that they've got a better solution for this. They've decided that it's going to be provisional spectrum as opposed to temporary, and people can reapply. So it will allow operators to use some of the spectrum whilst trying to license and buy more of the spectrum. There's another complication, unfortunately, because of the incompetence of a variety of telecommunications and communications ministers, especially Faith Mutambi, that South Africa was supposed to turn off analog signals. Those are the things that you pick up with bunny ears. Turn off analog signals used for television and hand those over to cellular operators. Now, the deadline from the UN's ITU was June 2015. So we are 6 years over deadline. This process is going on, but the company that's going to have the most impact upon is ETV, because they use that free-to-air broadcast technology. And what was supposed to happen was the government was going to give out 5 million of these set-top boxes, which would convert a digital signal into something for an old analog television. Of course, the Guptas had eyes on how to get that contract, so it got stalled, and now that signal is being turned off. Now those frequencies, 700 megahertz and 800 megahertz, are so valuable that the GSMA, the GSM Association, the umbrella body for the cellular industry, calls that the digital dividend. It's so valued, the dividend for cellular operators to use these two bands of radio waves has such a useful impact for the broadband industry and for us consumers who are able to get better, faster, cheaper wireless internet, all via cell phone. The vast majority of people in Africa and in South Africa get the internet through mobile. Mobile devices are the predominant form of technology. They are the computer that most people have. So getting better quality cellular broadband just means that most people will have a better experience. And they may not have a 5G phone, they may not have a 4G phone. The GSMA, which is a great organization, recently said, I think it was last year or the year before, they said this is the year of 3G, when 4G and 5G, because that's how long it takes for a poor continent like ours for people to start to afford the technology that's the handsets have got to be able to receive 3G or 4G, and of course the cost of them is an impediment. So it's vitally important that cellular operators are given the means of production, the land to build the business upon, as it were. And ICASA has been outflanked and outmaneuvered, partly by its own political heads, the various communication ministers who've had bizarre agendas of their own, and partly because they are underfunded by government. The government cannot, for some reason, it's really mind-boggling. They cannot understand how vitally important communications is to any country. It is the lifeblood of this internet, of this knowledge economy where people communicate, do Skype meetings, do team meetings, use Zoom, as we are doing now. These are the tools of production. This is how companies operate and make money. If they can't get a good signal, and every time there's load shedding, the cell phone signal deteriorates. These are impediments to people being able to operate. If it's a slower signal, it can have a knock-on effect on people's businesses. Everyone's businesses should be based up in the cloud. You don't need to have the information only on a computer on your desk. Our computers are pulling it off the cloud and we're operating. That's the way the world works now. You use services like Salesforce or Microsoft's Azure cloud system. That's how it all works. So these just make the cost of doing business and the ease of doing business harder. The point of regulators is to make the industry operate better, and hats off to the CEO of ICASA, who managed to get all of these operators, including Liquid, into one Zoom meeting or one Teams meeting. I'm quite sure it was Microsoft Teams, and said to them, this is not working. You were supposed to have the auction this March 2021. We're having it next March 2022. Let's do something. Let's solve the problem before we lose another year. So hats off to Wellington. He does, he's brokered a compromise so that we're not going to have problems with the auction next year. And that's really, great to see. This is very proactive behavior from ICASA, and that's what we need to see. We need solutions. We don't need any more problems.
And hats off to you for being able to unpack what sounds like a very complex issue. But I also want to move to this...
Speak non-stop for how long?
It's about 4 minutes now. But yeah, let's speak about the legal battle that was brewing. The operators, as well as ICASA, had been set for a showdown in the High Court in Pretoria on Monday as well as Tuesday. From what I gather, this will not happen anymore. Please explain why.
Yes, so the ICASA CEO set up this meeting, spoke to the operators, obviously had done some homework and presented this proposal around provisional spectrum as opposed to temporary spectrum. I mean, we're journalists. We understand there's great meaning in a single word. So from what I understand, and Tech Central has been very good on this, techcentral.co.za, as it always is on technology and communications. excuse me, as I understand it, the changing of the word from temporary to provisional means that there's a possibility of it becoming, they don't have to go through another process to get the spectrum. Once they've gone through one process, they have the spectrum, and then the terms and conditions or whatever else will be applied. But it's progress. I drove past the street sign yesterday from the Citizen, or Friday, and it said, "Lights to stay on." And I thought to myself, this is the world we live in South Africa, that we're so used to load shedding, that the headline on newspaper polls is, "The lights are going to stay on." The regulators diffused a complex legal situation, and is doing, what it should for the industry. Fantastic. This is what we need, right?
Also interesting is the argument which has been made by RAIN, which you touched on a short while ago, which opposed the Telkom application, warning in its court papers that Telkom was trying to license spectrum via the back door, and saying that the company was successful in securing this interdict against ICASA, there could be a permanent harm done to the competition in the industry, also saying that it would also withdraw. Speak us through this aspect.
Sure. So Telkom, remember, was originally the landline incumbent and a very aggressive and destructive monopolist. Yeah. It is now the smallest of the four cellular operators, the mobile networks, and it is really an underdog. But it inherited a lot of spectrum, a lot of very useful frequencies with its parent, as it were, and it's flipped things around quite interestingly now that mobile obviously is bigger than everything else. But Telkom had enormous infrastructure, cabling and fiber optics. So that's what a lot of operators have become. They've become providers of connectivity, be it through cellular, be it through fiber. I mean, there was just a massive announcement last week between Vodacom and Remgro with a 6 billion rand fiber business that would combine the assets. Remgro includes Vuma and Dark Fiber Africa. So very interesting consolidation, if you will. I'm sure the Competition Commission is going to be looking at all of these kinds of deals. But what it is providing connectivity. I want fiber at home, but when I'm out, I need a cellular signal. I need 5G because every now and again I have to stop and do I'm very busy and important. I have to do a video call or, something like that. Why should I buy it from two operators? I should buy it from one. I could also pay them for my Netflix. These are the evolving natures of consumer relationships. If you're a trusted company and you have a relationship with a Vodacom like I do, why shouldn't I buy my smart fiber from them? And why shouldn't I trust them to, provide me with Netflix or pay for Showmax or, whatever the other options are. And what these cellular operators have realized is that they know a lot about customers. And they can offer better services, and they already have a billing arrangement with customers. So that's part of what Telkom is able to offer, and of course Vodacom and MTN and everybody else. But what RAIN is saying is that Telkom might find a way, or the other operators, to gain spectrum, as it were, through the back door, and that's that's their allegation. I don't know whether it's it's been verified or it's the case, but the bottom line is that most of the complaints about the auction process that was supposed to happen in March this year was around the structuring of the auction, and it was particularly weird. I wish I could explain it to you, but I've kind of, every time I understand it and look away, you forget. It's so complex, which is some operators could pitch this and some operators could do that, and these tier operators could come in at the process over here, but the smaller ones came in first, and there was a lot of dispute about that and how it was structured. So that's part of the process.
Tell you what, Toby, we do need more time to discuss what sounds like a very complex matter, but thanks for that explanation, basically unpacking for us that issue of a spectrum and also mobile operators withdrawing their spectrum lawsuits against ICASA.